Assalamu alaikum students. This is Dr. Yusuf here. So I'll be teaching you the anatomy. So here, this is our first lecture in anatomy in this course. So this is here we will discuss the overview of the nervous system, a brief outline of the nervous system. Okay. So the objectives covered will be, one is at the end of this lecture, you will be knowing to describe the structural and functional divisions of the nervous system. And the second will be, you will be able to name the parts of the nervous system and discuss its functions. Okay. So these are the two objectives which we will try to fulfill. So to begin with, as you know, the nervous system is a very important system which will be controlling, directing, as well as sensing different forms of sensation from different parts of the body, as well as it will be controlling many organs as well as the systems. Okay, so the nervous system, for descriptive purpose, it will be divided into two parts. So one is the central nervous system as well as the peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system consists of the brain as well as the spinal cord and all its related structures. Okay, and the peripheral nervous system, it will consist of the 4 pairs of cranial nerves as well as 31 pairs of spinal nerves. What you are seeing here in yellow color, these are the spinal nerves. So yellow colored structures are the spinal nerves. Okay, which part you are part of the nervous, the peripheral nervous system. And the central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. Please do not send your attendance. I will take the picture of all of your names at the end of this lecture. Okay. So don't send your name and ID. I will not be able to collect those. Okay. So I will at the end, I will see the participants and I will take the picture of all of your names. Okay. So the nervous system consists of the central nervous system as well as the peripheral nervous system. So the central nervous system, as I said, will be the brain and the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system consists of the cranial nerves. Cranial nerves are those nerves which are coming from the brain. Those are called as cranial nerves. And the spinal nerves will be 31. Okay, so 31 pairs because they are on either side, and this will be called as the spinal nerves. Okay. The central nervous, the nervous system, functionally, it is divided into two parts. This was structural difference. This was structurally divisions, structural differentiation into central as well as the peripheral nervous system. Functionally, again, it is divided into two. One is the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. Somatic nervous system, which is under our control, which is voluntary, that is called as, which is under our control, that is called as voluntary. And the nerves that the message from the sense organ to central nervous system, that is the sensation of any touch, pressure, temperature, pain, and all those things, that is the sensation. And from the CNS to the target organs, that is the peripheral, the motor nervous system. Okay, so it consists of both the sensory as well as the motor. That is called as the somatic nervous system, which is mainly under our control, that is voluntary. Then we have another system which is not under our control, that is called as involuntary. Involuntary, that is the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system. This is autonomic because it is automatic, not under our control. It controls functions of the body not under conscious control or under our control. So it will be automatic. It consists of a set of neurons that control the heart. As we know, we cannot control the heart. We cannot increase the heart rate or decrease the heart rate. Okay. As well as the intestinal mobility for absorption and other things, as well as all other organs. Okay. Other organs, especially the which are present in the abdomen as well as in the thoracic region. Okay. Then The autonomic nervous system has two divisions. This autonomic nervous system has two divisions, which is the sympathetic as well as the parasympathetic. So once again, I will repeat. Structurally, the nervous system is divided into two parts: central as well as the peripheral nervous system, and functionally, it is divided into sympathetic and autonomic. Autonomic is again divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic. Okay. So now we'll see the difference between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system has two types of nerves. One is called as the preganglionic nerves and the postganglionic nerves. The preganglionic nerves of the sympathetic division are found only in the gray matter in the thoracolumbar spinal cord. So if you see here, this is the spinal cord. This is the brain, and here is the spinal cord. Okay, this belongs to the central nervous system. But here, if you see beside that, there is one more chain. There is something called a sympathetic ganglion or sympathetic chain. Okay, on either side, and there are nerves running from here. Okay, so this belongs to the the autonomic nervous system, especially the sympathetic nervous system. So it is called as the thoracolumbar outflow because all these nerves are coming from the thoracic region, T1 to T12, and from the lumbar, okay, upper lumbar. Okay, so this is called as the thoracolumbar outflow. Okay, so these nerves are coming from the thoracolumbar region, and that is called as the thoracolumbar spinal cord, especially from the gray matter in the thoracolumbar spinal cord. So these nerves will be coming from this spinal cord, and these are short. So these are called as the preganglionic nerves. Okay, preganglionic nerves. Okay, so these ganglionic nerves, preganglionic nerves, are short and they relay here. Some will relay here in the sympathetic chain, some above the level, some below the level, and some will even go outside the sympathetic chain, and then they will have ganglion like the celiac ganglion and other ganglions where they will be relaying outside. So these are called as the pre-sympathetic. Then those after this ganglion, those nerves which are coming out from this ganglion, these are called as the post ganglion. They're relaying here, as you can see here, and they are coming out post ganglion nerves here. So here also the preganglion nerves and the postganglion nerves are coming. All these are okay. So some might go outside this chain, and then they can form a separate ganglion. Okay. Then the postganglion nerves will be there. So whatever is before the ganglion, that is called as the preganglion nerves. What are after the ganglion, those are called as postganglion nerves. So the preganglion nerves of the sympathetic division are found only in the gray matter in the thoracolumbar cord. That is, they are short, very short. If you can see here, they can just start from the spinal cord and end here within the ganglion. Then the preganglionic sympathetic nerve fibers terminate in the sympathetic ganglion, as I showed you. These are the sympathetic ganglions. So a lot of ganglions here. Here also it will be present. Okay. Then the postganglionic sympathetic neurons, they will be long, as you can see here. So here, if you see here, these are postganglionic nerves. Postganglionic nerves are continuous, and preganglionic nerves are showing dotted lines. You can see here, the sympathetic, the presympathetic will be shown in the dotted lines, and the postganglion will be a continuous line. So as you can see here, the postganglion nerves are very long, and they go and relate to all these organs, like the heart, like the trachea, the lungs, liver, stomach, all the abdominal as well as the thoracic organs, and some even go to the eye and other things. Okay, so these all are postganglion nerves, which are continuous nerves. These are called as postganglion, and these are the preganglion. In case of the sympathetic nervous system, the preganglion nerves will be short, and the postganglion nerves will be, or the neurons will be long. Arise from the sympathetic ganglion in the sympathetic trunk or the paravertebral ganglion. So this is the sympathetic ganglion or the paravertebral ganglion. Paravertebral because they are beside the vertebra. That's why they are called as para, means beside. Okay, paravertebral ganglion, and end in the organ. And you can see here, this postganglion fibers will go and end in the different organs. So what is the function of this sympathetic nervous system? These are very important in case of any flight. Okay, when you're afraid. So it prepares the body for arousal. So any quick action, sudden action. Okay. So all this will be done by controlled by the sympathetic nervous system. So they will somebody close their microphones. Okay, so the functions, they are preparing the body for sudden action in case of emergency, for arousal, and they will increase the breathing because they are relying on the lungs. Okay, so they will increase the breathing, they will increase the heart because they are relying on the heart. So they will increase the heart rate and they will decrease the digestive activity. Okay, in case of if you are afraid and if you are running, then your breathing will increase, the heart rate will increase. So all these will be increased in case of the arousal. So this is because of the stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system. Then we have the parasympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic also has two types of ganglion, the preganglionic and the postganglion. Okay, so this is called as the, if you see here, so this is the some nerves are coming from the cranial nerves, some are from the cranial. With the nerves which are coming from the brain, they will be called as cranial nerves. Okay, so as you can see here, the 10 nerve, 9 nerve, the 7 nerve, as well as the other nerves will be coming from the brain, and some will be coming from the sacrum. So this is called as the craniosacral outflow. Here it was thoracolumbar. This was thoracolumbar outflow because the nerves were coming from the thoracic and the lumbar region. But in case of the parasympathetic, it will be coming from the cranial nerves as well as the sacral, the end here. Okay, so this is called as the craniosacral outflow. So here are the sympathetic nerves. Now they are not shown here. They are mainly showing the parasympathetic nerves. Okay, so they are coming from the cranial nerves, especially the third, seventh, ninth, and 10th, as well as the sacral nerves, S2, S3, and S4. And they will be also relying on the same organs, most of those organs. Okay, okay, and they also have the preganglionic as well as the postganglionic nerves. But if you see here, the ganglions are outside and they are near on the organ itself. Usually they are on the organ itself. They will come all the way up to the organ, and the ganglions are on the organ, and the postganglionic nerves are very short. But it is totally opposite to that of the sympathetic. Sympathetic, the preganglionic were short and the postganglionic were long. But in case of the parasympathetic, the preganglionic nerves are very long here. So if you can see up to, they are going up to the heart, to the lungs, to the liver, and the postganglionic nerves are very short. Okay. So the parasympathetic nervous system, the preganglionic nerves are long, extend from the neurons in the gray matter of the brainstem and the sacral segment of the spinal cord to the parasympathetic ganglion close to each internal organ. So the preganglion, this who has opened his microphone.
يعني رعبة كانت فظيعة الحقيقة. الحمد لله سلام. مشان حسابك. لا شو حكيت شو بحساب انت ليش بتسالي كثير ومعقول اخذ من السفر وخاصه مع سياره العقيد يعني انتوا اثنين عسكر.
Okay, so the preganglionic nerves are long and extend from the neurons and they go up to the organ. Okay, the preganglionic nerves are long, extend from the neuron in the gray matter of the brain stem and the sacral segment of the spinal cord, and they go the parasympathetic ganglion up to the parasympathetic ganglion, which are close to the internal organs. So as you can see here, the ganglions are on the organs or near the organ. Okay, and the postganglion nerves are very short, just very short. Okay, so the postganglion nerves are short, extend from the parasympathetic ganglion, which are located in or on the structure being innervated. Okay, so they are very short and they will be just as soon as they begin, they innervate the organ. What is the function of this? This is just opposite to that of the sympathetic nervous system. This will facilitate in non-emergency responses of the body. Okay, like they increase the motility of the GIT. As we saw in the sympathetic, they decrease the activity of the digestive system, GIT. But here they increase the motility of the GIT. So as I said, there will be the activities will be just opposite to the sympathetic system. So they will decrease the heart rate in this parasympathetic. Here they will increase sympathetic, they will increase the heart rate and breathing. But in case of the parasympathetic, they will decrease the heart rate as well as the breathing activity. Okay, as well as other functions are there. We will discuss when you go to the next stage. Okay. Now coming to the central nervous system itself. So the central nervous system, the brain constitute about 1/50th of the body weight. So this brain, even though this is a very important organ which will be controlling all the parts of the body, but the size is much more smaller. That is 1/50th of the body weight and lies within the cranial cavity in the skull, within the skull cavity, that is called as cranial cavity. So this central nervous system will be present within the cranial cavity. The parts of the central nervous system will be one will be the cerebrum. This is the cerebrum, the large structure. Then we have the smaller brain. This is called as the cerebellum. And inside there will be some important structures which are called as together they're called as the diencephalon. Diencephalon. So we have the cerebrum outside, then diencephalon, then the cerebellum. Then this is about the upper part. Then below we have the brain stem. So this is the brain stem. It acts like a stem. So this is the stem of the brain. This is called as brain stem. It has three parts: the midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. Midbrain, pons, as well as the medulla oblongata. There are three structures within the brain stem. Okay, so the cerebrum, then cerebellum and diencephalon above and below within the brainstem, midbrain, pons, and the medulla oblongata. Cerebrum. So this is the cut section of the cerebrum. Okay, to show the structures which are deep inside also. The cerebrum, this is the largest part of the brain, as we can see, make out from here. It is the largest part of the brain. It is divided by a deep cleft, the longitudinal cerebral cleft. If you see here, there is a cleft between that, and it will divide the whole brain cerebrum into two cerebral hemispheres. Okay, by a longitudinal fissure between the hemisphere, or a deep cleft, that is called the longitudinal cerebral fissure, which will divide the cerebrum into right and left cerebral hemispheres, the right as well as the left cerebral hemisphere, each containing one of the lateral ventricle. Within that, there are cavities filled with CSF. Okay, within the cerebrum, there will be two cavities. These are called as two lateral ventricles, right and left lateral ventricles. Then below, if we go, we'll have the third ventricle, and much more below in the brainstem, there will be the fourth ventricle. Okay, so here in the cerebrum, there will be the two lateral ventricles. The superficial peripheral part of the cerebrum is composed of the nerve cells, bodies. Okay, so that is the cell body neurons. Okay, cell bodies of the neurons will be present, and this is will be forming the cerebral cortex. So this will form the cerebral cortex. It is gray in color, and it is made up of neurons, collection of the cell bodies of the neurons. Okay, so this is called as the cerebral cortex. So outside we have the gray matter, okay, which is gray in color, so it is called as gray matter, and inside it is formed by the white matter consisting of the nerve fibers. All fibers will be running here. So, and they are myelinated, they are covered by a myelin sheath. That's why they look white. So that will be called as the white matter. So the whole of the cerebral hemisphere is divided into outer, the gray matter, and inside white matter. Outer gray matter is made up of the cell body neurons, and the white matter is made up of the fibers, nerve fibers. Okay, so this constitutes the cerebral cortex and the inner medulla. Okay, Coming to the cerebrum, much more details. The cerebral cortex shows many infoldings of varying depth. If you see here, the surface is not smooth, but it will be showing elevations as well as grooves or sulcis. Okay, so the exposed areas of folds are called as gyri. These elevations are called as gyri, and these grooves are called as sulci. Sulci. So here you can see here this is the central sulcus, and other sulcuses, important sulcus like the lateral sulcus are there. So all these are called as sulci. These grooves are called as sulci, and the elevated part are called as the gyri. Why they are present like this? These convolutions greatly increase the surface area of the cerebrum. So what is the function of this elevation and depression? They will actually increase the surface area. Why do you want to increase surface area? So that the whole part of the body is represented on the brain. So each part of this brain will be controlling one part of the body. So if you increase the area of that part, so it can be increased by these elevations and enfolding, kind gyre, which will increase the surface area so that the body, the whole body can be represented much more better on this surface. Okay, so these convolutions greatly increase the surface area of the cerebrum. Any difficulties still here? Any difficulties?
No,
No,
no.
doctor, thank you.
Okay. Now we'll go further. So each hemisphere of the cerebrum is divided into lobes. So this is the cerebral hemisphere. We saw that there are elevations and gyri, okay, which increase the surface area. Now this whole of the cerebrum is divided into lobes, okay, depending on where this lobe is present and under which cranial bone. So each hemisphere of the cerebrum is divided into lobes, which takes the name of the bone of the cranium under which they lie. So there are different cranial bones, okay, which form the skull, and deep to that, similar lobes with similar names will be sitting under the or lying under the those bones. Under the frontal bone will be the frontal lobe. So under the frontal bone will be the frontal lobe of the cerebrum. Under the parietal bone, we'll see the parietal lobe. And under the occipital bone, we have the occipital lobe. And under the temporal bone will be the temporal lobe. So the whole of the cerebrum will be divided into frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and temporal lobe. Four important lobes. Okay, so the central sulcus will divide into frontal lobe and the parietal lobe. Then we have the parieto-occipital sulcus, which divide the parietal lobe from the occipital lobe. Then we have the lateral sulcus, which will divide the frontal lobe from the temporal lobe. So there are four important cerebral lobes: frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal lobe. Now coming to some of the important functions of the cerebrum. The functions are actually three main varieties of activities associated with the cerebral cortex. One is called as the mental activities, then the sensory perception, and the initiation and control of the skeletal muscles, that is the motor. Okay, so the mental activities is involved in the memory, like intelligence, the sense of responsibility, thinking, reasoning, moral sense, learning abilities are attributed. These are all attributed to higher centers of the cerebrum. Then there are other activities like sensory perception, means feeling of the sensations, including the perception of the pain. You feel the pain, as well as the temperature, whether it is hot or cool. Okay, then you can feel the touch sensations. Then you see. Seeing also is a special sensation. Hearing is also a special sensation. Tasting and smelling is also special sensations. Okay, so there are general sensation like pain, temperature, and touch, as well as there are special sensation like sight, hearing, taste, and smell. All are part of the sensory perception. Then we have the motor perception, okay, or motor control, that is initiation and control of the skeletal muscles contraction. So whenever you want to lift a glass of water. So there are so many muscles which will be acting. So this is because of the controlling of the brain, uh, which will send the impulses to the skeletal muscles. This is called as the motor innervation of the muscles. Okay, so whenever there is stimulus to the motor nerve, so it will stimulate that particular muscle, and there will be contraction and there will be movement of the body, like walking, running, eating. So all these movements need some kind of skeletal muscle action. So this is the motor function. So these are some of the important functions: sensory, motor, as well as some mental activities like very special, which are controlled by the higher centers like thinking, reasoning, responsibility, memory, intelligence, and all those things. Okay, so these are some of the brief functions of the cerebrum. It has many more functions, but these are briefly the some important ones. Coming to the second part of the central nervous system, that is the diencephalon. Diencephalon is made up of a group of what you can say, call it as the nuclei, collection of the cell body neurons within the brain. They are called as nuclei. Okay, so like the thalamus, a very important nuclei which is present here. This is the thalamus. So here, if you can see here, so here was the cerebral cortex on either side. Okay, and the medulla, gray matter and white matter. And deep inside, if you see, there are collection of cell body neurons. Usually it will be cell body neurons will be outside here, but there will be within the white matter, there might be cell body neurons collections. So these form some important nuclei like the thalamus. Thalamus is a very important structure. Then below that there will be hypothalamus, and there are other some more nuclei are there like epithalamus and other things. Okay, so these together they form the diencephalon. It consists of the thalamus. Diencephalon consists of thalamus, hypothalamus, as well as other smaller related structures. So the main structures will be the thalamus, as well as the hypothalamus will be here. So here you can see the thalamus and here is the hypothalamus. Okay, so these are part of the diencephalon. Then going to the brain stem. Brain stem, as we have already seen, it has three parts: midbrain, pons, and the medulla oblongata. The midbrain is the area of the brain between the cerebrum above and the pons below. As you can see here, midbrain is between the cerebrum above and the pons below. It consists of group of cell bodies and nerve fibers tracts which connect the cerebrum with the lower parts of the brain and with the spinal cord. So the nerves will be running above as well as below. Okay, so they are called as tracts. So group of nerves running in the same direction, they're called as tracts. So some nerves will be going to the sensory nerves will be going and they're stimulating from the spinal cord to the cerebrum. And some fibers will be going from the cerebrum, those are motor. From the cerebrum, the stimuli will go through these different structures to the midbrain and pons, medulla oblongata, into spinal cord and to the different structures. So the tracts will be running above and below. So it consists of group of cell bodies, nerve fibers, which connect the cerebrum with the lower part of the brain and the spinal cord. Okay, the cell bodies act as relay stations for ascending and descending nerve fibers. So as I said, there are ascending fibers and descending fibers. Together they're called as ascending and descending tracts, which details again you'll study later. Okay. Next, coming to the next structure, that is the pons, which is present between the midbrain and the medulla oblongata. It is the pons is situated in front of the cerebellum. Cerebellum is behind here. If you see here, this is the cerebellum. This is the cerebrum, and this is the cerebellum. So the pons is present between the midbrain and the medulla oblongata. Okay, so just below the midbrain and above the medulla oblongata, this is the pons. It contains mainly of nerve fibers which form a bridge between the two hemispheres of the cerebellum. So it will be acting as a bridge between the two hemispheres of the cerebrum. Okay, cerebellum, and of the fibers passing between the higher levels of the brain and the spinal cord. So pons acts as a very important area which will be connecting the cerebellum as well as the cerebrum as well as the spinal cord. So it will be giving us to different fibers which will be running about downwards as well as to the cerebellum. Third, The third part, that is the medulla oblongata, even though this is the lower part, but it is a very important part, medulla oblongata. It extends from the pons above and it continues with the spinal cord. As you can see, above pons, below will be the spinal cord, and it ends at the foramen magnum. If you see the skull, at the base of the skull, there is a large opening that is called as the foramen magnum. So the spinal cord will be passing through the foramen magnum of the skull bone, at the base of the skull bone. That is opening is called as foramen magnum. Coming to the functions, this the vital centers lie in the deeper structure. So this medulla oblongata is very important because there are very important vital centers. Which are those? One is the cardiac center, the respiratory center, the vasomotor center, then the reflex centers of the vomiting, cough, sneezing, and swallowing. All these are present in a very small area called as the medulla oblongata. The most important vital centers will be the cardiac, respiratory, and the vasomotor. So because they're controlling the heart rate, they're controlling the respiratory rate, which are very important part of the life of a person. So they are called as vital centers. Vital means the most necessary, most important, which are important for life. Those are called as vital centers. So these are present in the medulla oblongata at the lowermost part of the brainstem. Then finally, we are going to the cerebellum. Okay, cerebellum, it is situated behind the pons and immediately below the posterior portion of the cerebrum, occupying the posterior cranial fossa. So this cerebellum is present in the posterior cranial fossa. The cranial fossa, the cavity is divided to anterior, middle, as well as the posterior. So this cerebellum will be present in the posterior cranial fossa behind this brain stem, behind the pons, as well as the other parts of the brainstem. It is ovoid in shape, it is almost oval in shape and has two hemispheres. Just like the cerebrum has two hemispheres, similarly the cerebellum also has two hemispheres. And they are separated by a narrow strip called as vermis. So in between, it is separated by a narrow strip called as the vermis, which will separate the two hemispheres of the cerebellum. Just like there are two hemispheres for the cerebrum, similarly there are two hemispheres for the cerebellum. Okay. So what are the functions of the cerebellum? This cerebellum is very important in the control of movements, balance, as well as coordination. Very important for the balance of a person. So if this is damaged, then the person loses his control, especially in case of the person who loses. You might have seen he will be deflecting on either side. He cannot walk straight because under the influence of the alcohol, this cerebellum loses the control and the person loses his balance. Okay, so that's why this cerebellum is very important and it controls the balance of the person as well as coordinated movements, coordination. Okay, very important thing. Finally, coming to the last part of the central nervous system, that is the spinal cord. So from the brainstem, the lowermost part of the brainstem, this is the medulla oblongata, this is the pons and the medulla oblongata. Below that will be the spinal cord. This is the spinal cord. As you can see, there is the spinal cord here. So here also you can see the spinal cord. The spinal cord is elongated, cylindrical part of the central nervous system. As you can see here, other parts are large and in different shapes, but this spinal cord looks like a cylindrical long tube. Cylindrical long tube. So it is elongated, cylindrical part of the central nervous system. It lies in the vertebral canal. There is a small cavity within the vertebral bones that is called as the vertebral canal. So this spinal cord is well protected. The whole of the central nervous system. If you see the brain, the cerebrum, as well as the cerebellum, they are covered by the skull bones, well protected by the skull bones. Okay, as well as in the brainstem. And the spinal cord will be passing through the vertebral canal and surrounded by the vertebrae. Okay, so safely kept in the vertebral canal. So it is well protected. So because the central nervous system is a very delicate structure, even slight trauma can lead to a lot of damages. So it has to be well protected. So it is present. The spinal cord is also well protected, just like the cerebrum, cerebellum, and the brainstem. Okay, so this spinal cord is present within the vertebral canal of the vertebral bodies, vertebras, surrounded by meninges. It is also covered by coverings called as the meninges. There are three types of coverings, that is called as the dura mater, pia mater, as well as the arachnoid mater. There are three layers, as well as even it is covered by a fluid called as the cerebrospinal fluid, within which the spinal cord will be easily floating. So if there is any trauma, this is well protected because it has coverings, meninges, which are fibrous coverings, as well as also there is a cushioning effect given by the cerebrospinal fluid, okay, within which it will easily flow, and if you want to damage it is difficult because it is floating within this fluid called a cerebrospinal fluid. It is continuous above with the medulla oblongata. As you can see above, we have the medulla oblongata and extends from the upper border of the atlas to the lower border of the first lumbar vertebra. In case of adults, it will be running from the first cervical vertebra up to the, that is called as the atlas vertebra, the first cervical vertebra, all the way up to the lumbar vertebra, the first lumbar vertebra in case of adults. But in case of children, it will be slightly lower. It will be up to third lumbar vertebra in case of children. But in case of adults, it will be up to the L1 vertebra, from C1 up to the L1. So from the cervical up to the lumbar vertebra, this is the spinal cord. Okay, the distal end of the cord will be cone shaped. It looks like an ice cream cone. That's why it is called as the conus medullaris. Conus medullaris. If you see here, the lowermost part of the spinal cord looks like a cone. That's why it is called as the conus medullaris. It is cone shaped and it is called as the conus medullaris. But the fibers will be still running downwards and they look like a tail of a horse. That's why it is called as the chorda equina. Equina. Chorda means tail, equina means horse. It looks like the horse tail. So all these are nothing but the nerve fibers which are running up to here. Then they will come out and they will supply the different parts of the body, different muscles. Okay. So this is called, it looks like a tail of a horse. That's why it is called as the chorda equina. So this is all about the central nervous system as well as the different types of system which we divided, classified into structural as well as the functional aspect, which include the autonomic nervous system. Okay. So if you have any doubts regarding any part of this lecture, you can please ask.
Thank you, doctor.
Okay, just wait. Let me take your attendance and then don't go. Just wait for me to just take this picture of your attendance so that I can submit it.
Doctor, we don't take it from model. You don't take
Uh,
it from model.
you you are entering from Moodle.
Yes, we submit present and model.
Model is
Doctor,
submitted.
I
Okay, then
didn't.
it's okay. Okay.
Doctor,
Uh, yeah.
I'm here, but I didn't take the attendance from the model.
Somebody. So I will be taking some
Yeah, I
attendance.
didn't make it.
Okay, no problem. Let me
Yeah,
take.
me too. I couldn't sign in Moodle.
Okay, let me take the picture and I will send it to Dr. Lamya, and then she might do whatever she wants. Okay.
Doctor,
Yeah.
have we studied these slides only from slides, or we have to back to reference to study this lecture?
This lecture mainly from the lecture, but sometimes there
Yes.
might be something, some extra for some good students. We might ask one extra question from outside. Okay, so
Only for our for us.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.